The Los Angeles Chargers are set to knock off the Kansas City Chiefs and win the AFC West this year. I'll explain on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert Lauren Cox. On today's episode, we're going to take a look at some recent running back rankings that I think are a little crazy in some spots. We're also going to do the final two teams in our biggest question series. We're going to talk about the uncertainty with the New Orleans Saints coaching staff, but we're going to start with the Los Angeles Chargers, who have some questions of their own, but I think they're all questions that lead to great answers. Before we dive in, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Lauren, I know that we are going to talk biggest question, but if we're talking about the Los Angeles Chargers, I just got to come out of the gate with the strong take that I think they're going to take the AFC West this year. We'll talk about some of the improvements that they made. I think they've added some good pieces to the offense that they needed. The defensive talent has got better, in just the year two evolution of Jim Harbaugh going from a team that he's kind of trying to mold in his image to now he can start to stack those layers on top of the proverbial cake. You know what I mean? I think the massive improvement we'll see in the Harbaugh system from year one to year two, along with the roster improvements, and I do think that the Chiefs will take a little bit of a step back. They'll regress a little bit. I'm still uncertain about their offensive line, and the loser of the Super Bowl usually has a little bit of a fallback. That, combined with all of the deep postseason runs that they've been on recently, I think it might take a toll. The Chiefs are going to make the playoffs. They'll probably be a team advancing into the final weekend of the conference championships, of course. But I think for the division, I think the Chargers take it this year.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, right, the Chiefs have to fall back down. And I think back to just 2 years ago when they won the Super Bowl and they were only 11-6. Like that, if they just have even that kind of a season, that's the window. I think the Chargers were 11-6 last season as well. Like that's the window for somebody like Los Angeles to, not emerge as some like clear, far and away better team than the Chiefs, but win the division by a game or a tiebreaker or something that comes down at the very end.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not saying that, the Chargers are going to be way better than the Chiefs, but I think they could be close, and the Chargers, maybe a couple of easier teams on the schedule, take advantage of certain more hunger in general. Like the Chargers are just going to be more hungry than the Chiefs are going to be. It's just human nature. And listen, I know it may not be a surprise, but I'm not the only one that feels this way. Our guys over at Locked On Chargers talked about knocking off the Chiefs this year as well.
I mean, I honestly think that these two teams are heading in different directions. I think that the Chiefs had such an incredible high and a great, just unbelievable heater of a run. Like, and I really, truly, I mean, you have to really acknowledge
some would say that. They still are, David. They've been three straight Super Bowls.
Some would say that for sure, and they would be justified in doing so. I think that they're at the end of that roller coaster ride. I think they have hit the bottom part of it, and they're going to start going downhill. And the Chargers have not beat the Chiefs since September 26th of 2021. And of course, that was
they haven't beat Patrick Mahomes.
Mahomes.
There was one where they beat him after that, where it was they were resting their starters.
I'm not even taking that into consideration. That doesn't count to me. I mean, the last actual win against the full-fledged version of the Chiefs was that long ago, a very long time. The Chargers loaded up on offense, provided all the weapons that needed, hopefully better protection for Justin. That defense is in great shape. I really love what Jesse Minter was able to do, and now he knows exactly what he has, and I think they can hit the ground running from the very, very beginning. That's why I firmly believe they are going to split with the Chiefs, and it's going to start the season with the victory in Brazil. That is where I think the Chargers are going to make that statement that not only are they here to compete in the AFC West, but they're here to make that statement on behalf of the team that has dominated the AFC West for the last decade by beating the Kansas City Chiefs.
Listen, I'm with it. Now, the question, I think, if we look at their biggest question, is did they do enough? Did they add enough talent to the offense to kind of make them take that next step? Lauren, when you look at what they've done, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, they have added, but I'm not sure that it's moving the needle a ton for me when I think about the weapons in particular, right? Like, you bring back Mike Williams, that doesn't really do much for me. And then I like Trey Harris as a second-round pick, but is a second-round pick at wide receiver going to be enough there? I mean, you hope Lad McConkey takes another step forward. I like Mekhi Becton on the offensive line, but like Tyler Conklin at tight end I don't know that he's moving the needle a lot for me. And you replace J.K. Dobbins with Marion Hampton, like good player, and Najee Harris, but like running back wasn't necessarily the problem for them either. So I'm trying to see where they move the needle other than what you mentioned at the top, like the system and time on task, everybody working together a little bit longer makes everyone better under Jim Harbaugh's leadership.
See, I do agree with you to a point on some of these places, but like to me, Najee Harris and Omarion Hampton is way better than Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. So I think you look at that, that's a clear upgrade. I think you look at the wide receiver position, and a lot of it is going to ride on Trey Harris. Like, they took Trey Harris in the second round. To me, he was a wide receiver out of Ole Miss who needs development. A lot of these skill position guys coming out of Ole Miss aren't really refined players just because of the style of offense that Lane Kiffin is running. So can Trey Harris, who's a big physical player with great physical gifts, speed, size, all that, can he refine his game quick enough to make an impact, to make that big jump? I think in theory, they wouldn't want Mike Williams to have to be one of their top three wide receivers, consistent three. He's kind of a placeholder to see if Trey Harris is going to break out. But that is a big question. And I think, that's the big question. But I don't know if we have a great answer to whether that'll be enough. It's kind of something that you got to watch. But one thing that gives me a lot of confidence in the Chargers, especially on offense, is just I think they're going to have an incredible offensive line once again. And when you have the tackle play that they're going to get, I think it's going to be a good enough culture where they will get something good out of Mekhi Becton. I think he's kind of a follower of wherever he's at, what the culture is there. He's going to be that. He's going to be locked in if he's with the Eagles, but he's going to be locked out, whatever you want to call it. Not locked on, we'll say that, when he's with the Jets. So I just like what they're building there, and the best part about that team is obviously Justin Herbert, but also the offensive line. And I think that's going to lead them to a ton of success no matter what. But they need to get some pass rush going as well now. Losing Joey Bosa, of course, seeing what they're going to get out of Khalil Mack at his age. The defense may be more of a question than I guess we're given talking time to.
Yeah, and even in the back end of the secondary, they've got some young corners in there with Dante Jackson from the Steelers. Like, again, when they were the number one defense in football last season, it's hard to come in and say, "Oh,
exactly,
it's a big question mark for him." But you've lost some talent there, and we know that historically over time, it's really hard for defenses to remain at the top. Like that's a ranking that fluctuates a lot from year to year. It isn't very sustainable. So there's a path here where the defense takes a slight step back. Probably not going to be number one, even if they're still a top 10 defense. And you wonder if you start to just like take down a little bit here and there. If we're looking for like Chiefs beating ability, they're going to need some young players to really step up and elevate their game.
They are. And every time we talk about the Chargers, before we move on, I refuse to not mention his name, Deion Henley, the linebacker. Folks, I know he's not a guy who most fans would immediately name. He's coming for the top spot. He's a fantastic young linebacker, Deion Henley. Keep an eye on him. But speaking of young, and speaking of the Chargers, remember a couple of years ago when this Chargers team was terrible, and then they fired the coaching staff, and then they went and hired Jim Harbaugh and his coaching staff, and now they're a good team again? Where are those coaches right now? Oh, they're in New Orleans. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with your friends and family? Maybe it's game day and suddenly you realize, I want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. And hey, the money that you save on tickets you can use on food, drinks, get a bigger group together. Gametime makes it all possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple, and prices actually drop the closer that you get to first pitch. They have the best features in the industry, from incredible last-minute deals, a clear view from your seat when you're buying your tickets, or the lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. I personally buy all my tickets on Gametime. NFL, college football, NBA, WNBA, MLB, concert, comedy even. They have everything. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Lauren, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the Chargers, who I think are a team that will win the AFC West. Working on my bold predictions already, Lauren. Getting them warmed up before training camp. That's one that I'm going with this year. I have faith in the Chargers, but need to move to a team that, quite frankly, I don't have a lot of faith in. And I think they might be last in their division this year. That's, I think, the prevailing thought, not just for me, but from most people. Look at the New Orleans Saints. And I think while some think that coaching is the reason that they're going to be better this year, I actually look at the other way and think the coaching may be a reason that they stay the same or get even worse. And my guy, the mastermind, Ross Jackson on Locked On Saints, talked about the coaching.
All right, the New Orleans Saints made a very good decision this offseason to completely transition their coaching staff on both sides of the football, a process that really began during the 2024 season. But I think the decisions that they made and the way that they went about not just settling for the status quo, which they absolutely could have done, was the right decision. And it gets an A from me in terms of one of the best offseason moves for the New Orleans Saints.
Listen, we got to see what happens, Lauren, but I mentioned it earlier. You take that coaching staff from the 2023 Chargers, you just flip them places with Kellen Moore is now the head guy, and then you throw Brandon Staley as the defensive guy. I don't have faith that this coaching staff would be capable of elevating a more talented roster, let alone a less talented roster, which I look at the New Orleans Saints roster, and I think it's one of the worst in the entire NFL.
Yeah, you talk about them finishing last in the division. I wonder if just finishing last in the NFL and the number one overall pick.
Yes.
Like them and the Cleveland Browns, to me, are the teams that stand out. It's like, what's their path to not having the number one pick? But yeah, I think if you're the Saints, you got to hope that personnel makes a big difference there, that sometimes it's wrong place, wrong time in Los Angeles with just players trying to fit culture and maybe the message just not quite getting across and maybe not being on the same page as the general manager, who was also fired in the middle of that 2023 season. And you hope that what Mickey Loomis has assembled is better, but a lot of these coaches are all coming in and essentially inheriting a brand new team that has a leadership void with the change at quarterback and some other key players go over. Like, it's a little bit more of a blank slate. So maybe there's some room for the coaching staff to dig in, or maybe that's room for the coaching staff to have too much influence and really highlight how much of a problem they are.
Yeah, I think that's my worry. And it's funny, Ross was on the show because Ross does the Friday show as my co-host, and we were discussing the Saints at one point in time and them bringing in Aaron Rodgers, which was something that I floated around if they were serious about winning. And Ross said that, Kellen Moore, younger head coach, Rodgers, a vibrant personality. Maybe that's a little too much for Kellen Moore in year one. And I think Ross didn't mean it in the way that maybe necessarily that I'm spinning the way that he put it. But to me, it just shows that a team that is kind of lost in the sauce right now and really needs leadership and needs a strong leader that has a precise direction and path to go down, that's what they need. And I don't know if Kellen Moore is that. I don't know if he's a cultural heartbeat that the Saints kind of need to get things back on track. And they have so many questions on the roster as well. I mean, just on offense, you're bringing in Kelvin Banks, who I like Kelvin Banks as the pick there for them. I thought it was a smart pick. Talise Fuaga, their first-round pick from last year, gets to be right tackle. Eric McCoy on the inside, Cesar Ruiz. I like the signing of Dylan Radins as just a depth signing on the offensive line that can plug in at guard if Trevor Penning doesn't work out there either. I think they could have a decent offensive line, but Rashid Shaheed coming back from injury, Brandon Cooks, Chris Olave, but my guy Ross Jackson, once again, he thinks maybe that could turn into some explosive plays.
And the Saints have invested in speed. Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Brandon Cooks at the wide receiver position, which will allow them to be able to, take the top off of defenses, but ideally also hit these guys in stride with the 12-yard pass and then let them go and get 8 yards after the catch, and then you've got an explosive play, right? 13 yards, let them go 8 yards after the catch, explosive play. Like, that's going to be the next step for this New Orleans Saints team.
And I agree, but can Shaheed stay healthy? Can Chris Olave not get any more concussions? Brandon Cooks isn't really a difference maker, in my opinion. Donovan Peoples-Jones had a good end of year right there, but then we come back to the quarterback. And is it Tyler Shuck? Is it Spencer Rattler? Are they going to add another veteran, Kirk Cousins? Like, the quarterback position is clearly the biggest question for the Chargers that people would look to, but I honestly think the biggest question is the coaching staff. But either way, pick your poison there. It doesn't look good for the Saints.
Yeah, I would say you said Chargers there, but you meant Saints. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. Well, it's the Chargers' old coaching staff. It's got me in a twist.
And that's exactly what I was going to get to. Like, I think in a vacuum, like I can talk myself into those weapons and saying, hey, like this is a group you can have success with, but how consistently are they going to get the ball on time and on target? Like, I was trying to think, when's the last time a team has rolled with a starting quarterback that's not an established veteran or a first-round pick, like a second-round pick like this, or potentially if it's like Spencer Rattler as like a second or fifth round guy. When has that ever worked out well? Like, I was going back to like Derek Carr started as a rookie second round pick and they won 3 games with the Raiders. Geno Smith started as a second round pick. They won 8 games. Like, is that's kind of like the ceiling then for this type of situation? I mean, it just doesn't feel like a really strong plan A.
Yeah. If you had a really good roster around a quarterback like that, you had a really good coaching staff around a quarterback situation like that, maybe you could eke your way to 7-8 wins in this division as well. It's not like they're in a murderer's row division where they can't get some wins, and that can help. They could beat the Panthers. They could beat the Falcons. I don't think that's crazy, but that's where it comes back to it. Like, I don't think that the roster is solid enough and reliable enough, and I think they actually have a bad coaching staff. I do not think that this is going to work out. I don't have faith in this defensive coordinator and Brandon Staley or Kellen Moore as the head coach. I just don't have any faith in any of it. I think that we are going to get to a situation where we are looking at a team that has a top 3 pick in the draft and a top 5 pick in the draft, something like that. And we'll probably be talking about the Saints as a quarterback contender this time next year.
Yeah, I think the only exception I can find to this is like, if you happen to find your diamond in the rough, Russell Wilson,
Russell Wilson, yeah.
It may, if Tyler Shuck is that, the Saints will be just fine. Everything else, not so sure.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I'm not so sure that Tyler Shuck can be that with Russell Wilson. I was not a big fan of Tyler Shuck coming out of the draft. I have been wrong about players coming out of the draft before. Maybe we're all wrong here, and the Saints found their quarterback right away, and Kellen Moore knows what he's doing. But I guess until I see it, I won't believe it. You could color me skeptical. But with that being said, we got a little bit of a running back ranking coming out here, and I thought it was an interesting ranking, and some of the information coming out of it I found pretty fascinating as well. All right, Lauren, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the Los Angeles Chargers. We talked about the New Orleans Saints, their biggest question moving into training camp. Again, training camp right around the corner. We've gone through all 32 teams in the NFL and their biggest question. So I hope you guys enjoyed that series. But now I want to look at it's ranking season, Lauren. It's that time of year, and ESPN put out a recent running back ranking that I thought was pretty interesting. Before we get into it, though, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. As training camp gets closer, moves are being made. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So in the ranking, number 1 was obviously Saquon Barkley. I feel like that's only fair. Derrick Henry at number 2. Jahmyr Gibbs at number 3. Bijan Robinson at number 4, which we'll get to Bijan Robinson in a second. Christian McCaffrey all the way down to number 5. Josh Jacobs at 6. Jonathan Taylor at 7. James Cook all the way up to number 8. Joe Mixon at 9. And Alvin Kamara at 10. Some honorable mentions here. Bucky Irving, Aaron Jones, Devon Achane, Breece Hall as well. James Conner, another guy who had an honorable mention. Some other guys receiving votes. Kyron Williams, David Montgomery, Brian Robinson, Chuba Hubbard, DeAndre Swift, and Kenneth Walker III. Lauren, for me, the thing that stands out right away is that Christian McCaffrey is all the way down at 5 after being number 1 in the rankings last year. I think with age and San Francisco's general fall off last year as a team, he may be getting penalized, but I think there's a lot of question about whether he can come back and be himself again.
Yeah, right. The rankings are running backs for 2025, and it's like, well, what version of Christian McCaffrey are we going to get in 2025? Because if you get the 2023 Christian McCaffrey, that's number 1 on the list for sure. But all of the variety of things, and when you start talking about Achilles tendonitis, like all the different things in there that scare you quite a bit for any athlete, but especially at the running back position, that can be a little challenging. And I think the list really highlights for me the changing of the guard there with young guys like Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson and Jonathan Taylor really, really high on this list. That the guys like Derrick Henry are still holding on, but the McCaffreys are starting to fall out here a little bit. And that's just sort of the natural progression of the running back in the modern NFL.
Yeah, it's the way it is. And I think Bucky Irving being one of the top honorable mentions, he's another young guy who could really get back up there. And then think Ashton Genty, not on this list because he's a rookie. You know, where is he? He could be in the top 10 again. So that changing of the guard is a great point. I got to point out this part with Bijan Robinson. So this isn't necessarily in the ranking, but they tell you their highest ranking, which someone ranked Bijan Robinson number 1 overall. I know that's crazy, but if we're saying for 2025, I don't think it's that insane that he could be the best running back this year. But the lowest ranking Bijan Robinson received was unranked. Someone didn't even have Bijan Robinson in the top 10 as a running back. I think that's crazy, and my guy Aaron Freeman over at Locked On Falcons thinks that's crazy as well.
So, if someone ran up to me and claimed to be from the future and said, hey, Bijan Robinson leads the NFL in rushing this year, I would actually believe that person and not immediately call the cops and say there's a crazy person claiming to be from the future. And I would also get some other tips from that person based off of that information. And so I think if Bijan has that type of year, it's going to be instrumental to the Falcons' success this year. It's theoretically possible that you could see Bijan adding, potentially 300 plus more yards to his total and pushing his rushing total to around 800 yards rushing.
Listen, I think Bijan Robinson might get Offensive Player of the Year this year. I think a monster year is coming, and someone having him not even in the top 10, while Joe Mixon in 2025, in this economy, Joe Mixon is ranked in the top 10. That's just insane to me.
Yeah, I've been trying to find any kind of, well, maybe it's this, but where is the flaw in Bijan? It'd be one thing if he had some fumbles or like some injury questions or something. He doesn't have a ton of looking through his numbers, like big breakaway runs. He's lower on the breakaway runs than a lot of other running backs in terms of yards on the explosive plays. He's kind of earn them 4 yards at a time, but that's not.
Thanks, Arthur Smith.
That doesn't drop you out of the top 10 at all. I mean, Christ, that was a really bit of a head scratcher to me, and I don't quite get that.
Yeah. Now, again, I think Ashton Genty is a guy who could pop into this list next year, like we said, Bucky Irving, but Devon Achane is another guy who is just, we talk about explosive runs. If you're talking about that, just his ability to turn a small play into a massive play. If he continues to hit massive home runs and the Dolphins turn into, which I think they need to, kind of a run-based team and get more physicality, he could be a guy who vaults up this list in a major way in kind of a Jahmyr Gibbs type way. He's got that kind of breakaway X-factor potential.
I also look at this list, and it strikes me how many of these players were either available as free agents or have even still been linked in trade rumors, right? Derrick Henry signed with the Ravens as a free agent. Josh Jacobs, the Packers, is a free agent.
Yep.
James Cook has been lingering trade speculation. Joe Mix was a free agent to the Texans. There's been Alvin Kamara trade rumors. Aaron Jones was a free agent. Breece Hall trade rumors. These top 10 running backs in the NFL are not some untouchable asset anymore.
Right.
He's kind of the only one here that is hands off. No one has any shot of being touched.
And even he left in free agency.
Yeah. And I suppose Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs are entering that now too, but they're so early in their careers. We don't think of them as even being that option. But yes, even Barkley was available that way too. It's wild how we can recognize how great these players are. And yet in the NFL, we'll just find the next Bucky Irving in the 4th round. No big deal.
Well, that's kind of part of it. Like you mentioned, the conversation comes full circle here. If you mention like, hey, look at the changing of the guard, all these young running backs coming in, that kind of points to why am I paying so much? Why am I giving Alvin Kamara a 3-year deal when I'm the New Orleans Saints and I look like I'm kind of heading into a transition phase where we may lose more games? Why am I paying for a 30-year-old running back like that when I can, add somebody in the draft? So you make a great point. We talked about the Chargers, Omarion Hampton, a guy they added early in the draft. Like, there are a lot of ways to get good value at the running back position, and it does create difficult conversations. And you're right, the list shows you some of the old greatness, but also why people would decide to move on from that old greatness. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, Lauren Cox, as we tell you every episode. Thanks for tuning in, and stay safe out there.